Hey friends, welcome finally back to some normal youth group time and happy Valentine's Day. I hope that you have in front of you some good goodies and some Valentine's Day cards to write to all of your friends in your group. And I just want to say that was our visioning team that came up with the idea, and they're the ones that also put together the goodie bags. So major shout out to them. I could not do ministry without my student leadership team. They are awesome. I want to start out this talk today by starting a debate. So, I want to know your favorite superhero and why they are so awesome and why you think they are the best. So, I will start. I think Captain America is the best superhero because I think, one, he is the most honorable superhero out of the Marvel universe at least. And two, he was worthy of picking up and wielding Thor's hammer. If you don't know, you can only wield Thor's hammer if you are worthy of wielding Thor's hammer. So I think that ultimately says a lot about a Captain America. So I want you guys to pause this video and discuss in your groups and debate in your groups who your favorite superhero is and why. So besides all the cool costumes and all the cool, superpowers and accessories that superheroes get, I think the reason why we love superheroes so much is because of what they do. They solve a problem, they fight bad guys, and they're brave, and they step up, and they defend people. So in other words, they do something about a problem at hand. And I think sometimes we wish someone would do something about our problems, do something for us too. So maybe make things change, to make things better, to solve the problem, to do something at least. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest areas in life where we all wish we could just do something about it. We're going to talk about things in the world that aren't quite right, some things in the world that just seem unfair, and some things that you could kind of call or name as injustice. And so when I say the word injustice, what comes to mind? Take a minute in your groups to discuss that question. When I say the word injustice, what comes to mind? So let's start with some definitions. If you don't know what injustice is, let's start with the root word of it, which is justice. So that simply means something that is right, fair, or equal. So injustice is just the opposite of that. So it's when we talk about injustices, we're talking about the things in our world that are not right, unfair, or unequal. And I think the real question we all face today is not do injustices exist? It's the question is, why doesn't somebody do something about the injustices we have? And that's the question we're really going to be wrestling with for the rest of this series. What does it look like, and whose job is it to do something about that injustice? Now, as we get started, I have to admit, a conversation like this can be very hard for a lot of us. And it can be tricky because so many of us see and experience injustice in different ways. And for some of you, this feels really heavy. You've been thinking about injustice a long time because maybe you've experienced it yourself. And you've seen how it has affected your family and your friends, and this topic hurts. And if that's you, I just want to take a minute to say right here that I'm so sorry that you're going through that. What you're going through and what you're walking through isn't okay. And if you take anything away from this message today, let it be that here in our student ministry, we do not ignore things that hurt our family. We want this to be a safe place where you can not only talk about what you're going through and talk about your real life experience, but where you could find real friends who love and support you through it. And on the flip side, some of you haven't had experienced any injustice. Instead, maybe you really feel surprised by it. Maybe you never thought about things like access to education or racism or food insecurity. And maybe even in this pandemic, as you're starting to see some things on social media, you feel that you feel like you keep on discovering things you never knew about in the world around you. You know, especially this year, we've been through a lot of injustices that have come up through this pandemic. Or maybe today, this is really the first time that you're hearing about injustice. And if that's you, that's okay. We have a really unique opportunity over the next few weeks to be able to see the other side of injustice for the very first time. And maybe, you know, if you're like me, you're finding yourself asking some questions that you've never asked yourself before. You know, like, why are there some students that never get in trouble when they should, but there are other students that always get in trouble even when they don't do anything? Or why do people still act like it's okay to make jokes that are racist or sexist or ableist? Why does that person continue to be bullied and it feels like no one seems to care enough to do something about it? Or why does the one person in our friend group go home to a house that feels unsafe while others don't have to worry about that? Or why is there so many little kids in our community that don't get to eat when school's out? Why are 3 meals a day not normal for everybody? And guys, my point is this: when we see injustice, it makes us ask some hard questions, whether that's through our own experiences, whether it's through someone else's experiences, or whether it's through learning about it tonight. It makes us wonder how others don't see it or how we may not have seen it before. And it's not that we don't care about injustices. I feel like if you knew about injustice, you would care about it because it's hurting another person. I think sometimes we just don't do anything about injustice because we just don't get close enough to see what's really happening and ask these hard questions. So take a minute in your groups to discuss the question: what is something you've noticed that is unfair in our town or in your school? Now, let me let you guys in on a little secret. We aren't the first people to have this problem. We aren't the first people to experience a world filled with injustice. We aren't the first people to not notice them from time to time. And we aren't the first people who needed a little help opening our eyes to seeing them. And I think that's part of the reason why Jesus made it a habit of pointing out to people the things that they hadn't seen or noticed before. And one question that was asked of Jesus a lot, and I'm going to phrase it in a couple of different ways, is who is cool with you? So people are asking Jesus, who is cool with you? Who is in good standing with you? Who is on the right side and who is on the wrong side? So people were basically trying to say, am I good enough to be with you? Am I a good enough person in your eyes? And so this passage that we're actually going to be looking at tonight in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus distinguishes between the righteous and the unrighteous. So we're going to pick up in the middle of a story that Jesus is telling to these people. So it says, then he will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came and visited me. So in this story, Jesus is explaining what or who a righteous person is and what they look like and what they do. So a righteous person, if you don't know, is one who does good and wants to help others. So it's simply a person who does good and wants to help others. And I think what is said next in the scripture is my favorite part about it, because these people that in the story that this king is talking to asks this king, they ask Jesus, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in person and go to visit you? And Jesus responds to them, or the king responds to them in this story and says, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So did you guys hear that? Did you guys notice that? Jesus was saying that the righteous people, the people that simply do good and want to help others, are the people who see and look for the injustices around them. So they care about the least of these, which are the people that need the most help, that feel the most pain, or get the worst treatment. These people recognize when someone is hungry or in prison or sick or left out. They see the injustice in the way people are treated. They see the injustice in their circumstances and they care about it. They act on it and they do something about it. And why? Because in caring for those or who are being treated as less than or left out, they're showing that they care about what God cares about and that they love who God loves. And see, I think people that are listening to the story in this time probably struggled with some of the same things that we struggle with today when it comes to injustice. They didn't see it. They didn't recognize it happening around them. And because of that, they didn't respond. And so, but Jesus is reminding us, and he was reminding them, that his people are those who look for people in their neighborhoods or schools or in their area who need the most help, who feel the most pain, or who get the worst treatment. And whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're still unsure, or maybe you're still figuring out your own faith, I think it's still important for all of us because we all want a world that's better, right? We all want a better world. We all want a world to where these injustices aren't happening. We all want the wrong things we all want the wrongs we see to be right. We all want things to be fair and good and equal and just, and we want the things that God wants too. And all of that, guys, starts with seeing it. Because before you can do something about injustice, you have to see it first. And it's easy to think something you don't see really isn't there. I do it all the time. I don't see something, I don't notice something, and I just pretend it's not there because I don't see it. And it's easy to think that because we don't recognize it or aren't impacted by it, it's not really that big of a deal. But the truth is that injustice is everywhere, guys. And if we want to be the people who do something about it, we have to start seeing it. We have to start opening our eyes. And so high school, I want you to pause here and discuss questions 4 and 5. And middle school, you keep on finishing to the end for the rest of your discussion. So for today, I want us to focus on this. When we have to see injustice before we can do something about it. So how can we open our eyes to see the injustices going on around us? Where do we start? And so I want to start with 2 simple things that we could do together. So one is we can move close enough to see it. So if we want to see injustice in the world around us, we have to be brave enough to stay close enough to see it. So what I mean by this is we can't turn our eyes or we can't shrug off whenever something we see makes us feel uncomfortable. That means maybe getting to know someone in your school who's different from you. It means talking to a few different trusted adults about some of the questions that you might have about potential injustices that you see in your school or your community or your neighborhood. And it even means asking God to help you see it too, to change the way you see people and the circumstances around you. And so the first one was move close enough to see it. The second one is to be curious enough to learn. The quickest way to see injustice is to listen to the people experiencing it. So when someone tells you about an experience that they are experiencing injustice, listen. And don't just listen, but try to learn. Try to imagine yourself in their shoes. Walk a mile in their shoes. Think about what they're saying. And here's a little heads up. It's going to make you uncomfortable, especially if it's something you've never experienced yourself or the kind that you didn't even realize that you've participated in before. And you might struggle to understand it or recognize why it's bad or even agree that something someone's telling you is even wrong or unjust. Don't shy away from the conversation just because it makes you uncomfortable. Because we're wired as a survival instinct to avoid being uncomfortable. I mean, some of you act like you're going to die if you have to talk to somebody on the phone in a phone call versus just texting them. Sometimes I call some of you people up and you're like, why are you calling me? Just text me. I mean, come on, Megan. But in this case, we hate being uncomfortable. But in this case, it's actually a good sign when bad things are making you uncomfortable because it means that you're seeing things the way that God sees them. So keep listening, try to learn, and when you hear about injustice, be curious, even if it makes you a little or even a lot uncomfortable. be curious about your own experience too. Because maybe you'll notice that you've experienced an injustice, but you've brushed it off because everybody around you keeps on telling you that it's not a big deal, or if it's not really anything. Or maybe you've noticed that you've participated in an injustice before without even realizing it. You can't know what you'll discover until you get curious and be open to what God may be doing in your life. So listen, so much of following Jesus is learning to see, think, and live in a way that's not natural to us. It's so unnatural sometimes. And one of the things that I love about your generation, about you guys here in this room, is that so many of you actually see and care about injustice more than any other generations before you, even more, probably more than my generation that I'm in. And here's what I'm getting at. You can be the generation to do something in areas where it might seem impossible. But the first step to doing something is to seeing it and help others see it too. And that's why we have small groups, guys. There we can talk about real difficult things and help each other see things we haven't seen before. In fact, your small group leader is a great person to talk to as you're processing and discovering new ways that you're seeing the world around you. And as you guys go through the rest of your small group, which I hope is filled with fun Valentine's Day activities, I want you to think about this quote from Maya Angelou. And I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. If not, I am terribly sorry. But she's a famous writer who wrote about injustice often. So this quote, she says, "Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better." Let me read that again. Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. And so that's what this series is about. Seeing better so we can know better, so that eventually we can do better. Okay, have fun. Happy Valentine's Day.